Respect isn't given to people like you, my supervisor laughed. So I quietly quit, spent 6 months building my own firm, and watched them sit in my waiting room begging me to hire them after their department collapsed without me. I was standing in the middle of the Ridgeway Metals executive boardroom in Akron, Ohio, staring at the wreckage of my career, while the man who destroyed it leaned back in his chair like he owned oxygen. Respect isn't given to people like you, Marlowe, sneered Dean Harker, the newly promoted operations chief, 45, smug as a billboard lawyer, and dangerous in the way men become when they mistake recklessness for strength. My presentation was still glowing behind me. Slide 16, Catastrophic Risk Points under New Federal Code 14.9. A bright red graph stretched like a wound across the screen. 24 pairs of eyes avoided mine. These findings are based on, I began. Theories, Dean snapped, slicing the air with his hand. Just theories from someone who's never worked outside a spreadsheet. The room went still. My throat tightened. 8 years at this company. 8 years of warnings, reports, night shift assessments, and carrying injuries home in my memory like scars. And he dismissed me like I was a rookie intern offering opinions about machinery I'd never touched. But that wasn't the part that broke me. No, the part that snapped something deep in me was the moment Evelyn Cross, the CEO, the woman who had mentored me when I first started, closed her binder and said nothing. She didn't defend me. She didn't even look at me. She just turned the page like I wasn't drowning right in front of her. I felt heat crawl up my neck. Dean stood, smoothing his tie. Let's move on to production targets. Something useful. He stepped toward the projector, and as he passed me, he whispered, quiet enough for only me to hear, "Don't push this, Marlowe. You're already 1 foot out the door." He didn't know I'd already found the flash drive in his locked desk drawer the night before. He didn't know I'd already read the files. He didn't know I'd already seen the signatures. He had no idea. The rest of the meeting blurred by. When the room emptied, I gathered my materials slowly, feeling every ounce of humiliation settle into something colder, sharper, a shape forming in the dark. I walked out without a single goodbye. That afternoon, when I cleared my desk, I found a manila envelope slid beneath my keyboard. Unmarked, except for a single handwritten line. You were right. Check the maintenance logs from last March. C. I froze. There was only one person whose name started with C. Carter Voss. Maintenance supervisor. The one who mysteriously left the company last month. Right after that equipment malfunction, everyone pretended wasn't serious. The one who had cried in my office 2 days before he disappeared and whispered, "They're hiding more than you think." I shoved the envelope into my bag. No dramatic resignation speech. No pleading. No second chances offered. I walked out of Ridgeway Metals for the last time knowing one thing. They hadn't just ignored my warnings. They had buried something. Something big enough to get people killed. And they thought firing me would keep it quiet. What they didn't know, what none of them had even imagined, was that I was the last person they should have pushed out. Because the moment I stepped into the parking lot, something in me clicked with terrifying clarity. I wasn't leaving defeated. I was leaving armed. And when I turned back to look at the building, I didn't feel fear. I felt the beginning of something I didn't yet have a name for. But I would. Soon. I didn't sleep the night I opened Carter's envelope. I sat at my dining table in my tiny apartment off Arlington Road, the maintenance logs spread out between half-drunk cups of cold coffee. The pages smelled like old metal. Ink smudged, corners creased, signatures rushed. None of that mattered. What mattered was the pattern. I knew Ridgeway Metals like I knew my own pulse. I joined the company at 24, fresh out of my master's program in industrial safety engineering, thinking I could change the world one machine guard at a time. Akron wasn't glamorous, but the plant was one of the biggest in the region, pumping out steel components for half of Ohio's infrastructure projects. It was supposed to be stable, respectable, a place where I could build a career and maybe feel proud of myself. For the first few years, I did. I was the girl who cared too much, the one who stayed after shifts walking the floor with the night crew, listening to workers complain about busted equipment, shortcuts, supervisors who pushed them past exhaustion. I didn't just log issues. I fixed them, pushed them, documented them until someone had to listen. And for a while, someone did. Her name was Evelyn Cross. When I first arrived, she was just the COO. Not yet the CEO she'd become. She had this way of making you feel seen. She pulled me aside after a quarterly audit and told me, "Marlo, you have an instinct for risk most people never develop. Don't let anyone smother it." I worshipped her for that. I thought she meant it. Back then, Ridgeway wasn't perfect, but the problems were manageable: old equipment, too much pressure on production, occasional near misses. Nothing like what it became later. Everything shifted when Dean Harker joined the company. He came from some aggressively lean manufacturing outfit in Texas that treated OSHA guidelines like optional reading. They brought him in to streamline efficiencies. What they didn't say out loud was, cut costs, push output, silence complaints. He walked in with that smile, white teeth, expensive tie, that whole wolf-in-a-suit aura, and suddenly everything tightened. Training hours were cut. Maintenance budgets slashed. Safety meetings shortened or skipped entirely. When I pushed back, I became emotional, overcautious, negative for morale. But it wasn't until the incident last March that I realized how bad it had truly gotten. A hydraulic press malfunctioned during second shift. Officially, 2 workers suffered minor injuries. But I remembered the blood soaked into the walkway and how Carter, the maintenance supervisor, looked at me with guilt carved into his face. "This wasn't a malfunction," he had whispered in my office. "The part failed because they used the cheaper replacements. Harker approved it. They're hiding the real report." 2 days later, Carter was gone. "Personal reasons," they said. "Family matter." Bullshit. I knew something was wrong, but with no documentation, no witness willing to speak up, it was just one more shadow in a room full of them. Until now, because the logs he left me weren't just proof of faulty equipment. They included timestamps, entries where my own recommendations had been removed and replaced with falsified signatures. Someone had been forging my name. Someone had been making it look like I had signed off on unsafe machinery. I sat there in my apartment, hands shaking. 8 years. 8 years of loyalty. 8 years of doing everything right. And someone had been building a paper trail to pin the blame on me when the next disaster happened. Was it Dean? Was it Evelyn? Someone else entirely? All I knew was this. My firing wasn't humiliation. It was preparation. They hadn't pushed me out because I was inconvenient. They pushed me out because I was in the way. And whatever they had planned next, I was never supposed to survive it professionally. Maybe not even physically. I closed the maintenance logs slowly. Now I understood the betrayal. But the real escalation, the part that would blow everything open, was only just beginning. The morning after I pieced together the forged logs, I woke up with that sick electric feeling. The kind you get right before your life changes in a way you can't undo. The kind that warns you, you're in danger, but you're already too deep to stop. I drove to a small cafe off Market Street because it was the only place open early and the only place where I wouldn't run into Ridgeway employees. I sat in the corner booth with the logs spread out in front of me, the same way I had the night before. I kept checking the door, half expecting Dean to swagger in, or Evelyn to sit down across from me with one of her practiced smiles. Paranoia doesn't come out of nowhere. It grows from patterns. And the more I read the logs, the more everything lined up in a way that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. 32 equipment checks, 27 maintenance sign-offs, 6 critical failures, and all of them carried a signature pretending to be mine. If Ridgeway had a catastrophic accident, and the paper trail would point straight at me. I would be the negligent safety specialist who had walked away from the company right before it all blew up. The disgruntled employee. The troubled analyst who had refused to cooperate. Dean wasn't just humiliating me. He was setting me up. And Evelyn? I didn't know anymore. The woman who taught me to be fearless had watched me burn without blinking. I left the cafe with a tightness in my chest that felt like fear mixed with fury. I drove without thinking, just letting my hands move on the wheel until I found myself outside the place I swore I'd never return to. Ridgeway Metals Plant 2. I parked across the street, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles went white. I wasn't going inside. I didn't need to. I just needed to watch. And that's when I saw him. Carter. He stepped out of the side entrance wearing a hoodie and a baseball cap pulled low, moving fast like he didn't want anyone to notice him. My breath caught. He wasn't supposed to be here. He wasn't even supposed to be in the state. The company told everyone he'd relocated. He reached his car, looked around, and for a split second, our eyes met, across the parking lot, through the morning haze. He froze. Then he shook his head sharply. A warning. Get out. Don't be here. But I needed answers, and he could see that in my face. After a moment, he unlocked his car, got in, and drove off. He didn't wave. He didn't smile. But he slowed just enough for me to follow. My heart was pounding as I trailed him across town to a cracked, faded apartment complex behind a shuttered strip mall. He walked up the stairs without looking back. I followed him to the second floor, where he unlocked his door and pushed it open just enough to say, "Not here. People watch. Come back in 10. Then he shut it again. 10 minutes never felt so long. When he finally let me inside, the first thing I noticed was the stack of boxes, documents, binders, flash drives, rolls of plant floor plans. The second thing I noticed was the bruise along his jaw. Jesus, Carter, what happened? He touched the bruise like he'd forgotten it was there. They're tying up loose ends. Because of the logs? I asked. Because of what's coming. I felt my stomach twist. What's coming? He sat down heavily, running both hands through his hair. Marlo, they aren't cutting costs anymore. They're hiding something. Something big. The press failure in March. That wasn't the first major incident. I know, I said quietly. But what are they planning now? He swallowed hard. They're preparing for a shutdown order. Yes, I know, after the new regulations. No, he interrupted, eyes locking onto mine. A forced shutdown. One they're making happen themselves. I stared at him. Why would they do that? He didn't blink. To collect the insurance payout. My mouth went dry. And they need someone to blame, he said. Someone already gone. Someone they've already discredited. Someone like me. Before I could speak, he opened one of the boxes and pulled out a thick file. Look, he said, before it's too late. And as I flipped through the pages, I realized I had only understood half of the betrayal. The real horror was still coming. The file Carter handed me wasn't a folder. It was a funeral. A slow, page-by-page burial of everything I thought I knew about Ridgeway, about my career, about the people I once admired. The first document was an internal incident report I had never seen. Subject line, Uncontained press failure, confidential level 4. Date, 3 months before the March accident. 3 months. I flipped pages, each worse than the last. There were emails from engineering leads reporting catastrophic wear on multiple machines, including the exact press that would later injure the second shift workers. Maintenance orders marked approved, but never issued. Safety memos stamped urgent, in red across the top that had been rerouted to Evelyn's office. My chest tightened. Why would the CEO bury these? I whispered. Carter exhaled, rubbing his temples. You don't want the answer to that. Yes, I said. I do. He reached into another box and pulled out a set of printed emails. Threaded conversations between Evelyn, Dean, and 2 board members I barely recognized. He handed them to me without a word. I scanned the first page, then the second. By the third, my vision blurred from a white-hot mix of disbelief and betrayal. The emails weren't discussing repairs. They weren't discussing risk. They were talking about payouts, the insurance valuation on the plant, the cost of replacing the entire hydraulic line, the savings from natural attrition if they avoided certain worker injury claims. And then, on the 4th page, I saw it. Evelyn's signature. Under a sentence that made my stomach drop. If we can attribute the negligence to Marlo before the investigation, we avoid corporate liability. My name, my life, my reputation, written like a goddamn shield to hide behind. I felt my throat close. She used my name? To protect the company? Carter shook his head. Not just the company. He walked to his kitchen counter, pulled out a sealed envelope, and placed it in my hand. "They're protecting themselves," he said quietly. Personally, I opened it, and my whole body went cold. Inside were photocopies of signed approvals for decommissioning an entire safety initiative I had proposed 2 years earlier. Except none of the signatures were mine. They were forged, sloppy in places, too perfect in others, but unmistakably mine. "Jesus," I whispered. "This is a setup. They've been planning this for 18 months, Carter said. "Since before Dean was hired. He wasn't brought in to cut costs, Marlowe. He was brought in to make the plan viable." I stared at him. "What plan?" He met my eyes with something like pity. "The plan to burn the plant down." I dropped the envelope. "Not literally," he said quickly, "but close enough. They're going to engineer a catastrophic failure big enough for insurance to cover a full rebuild. The payout goes to the company, but the bonuses? The ones tied to safety compliance and productivity adjustments? Those go to senior leadership." I felt the blood drain from my face. "And I'm the fall guy." Carter nodded once. "You were always the perfect choice. The overly emotional safety specialist. The one who complained too much. The one who didn't have allies in leadership anymore. The one who, he didn't finish. He didn't need to." I stood up so fast my chair scraped across the floor. "I need to go to the Department of Labor." "You can't," he said sharply. "Not yet." "Why?" I snapped. "Because someone else knows you have this." His voice dropped to a whisper. "And they're watching you." A chill ripped down my spine. "Who?" Carter swallowed. "There's someone inside the company feeding them updates about you. Someone who knows every file you ever touched, every report you ever submitted, every audit you ever conducted." I felt sick. "Who?" I repeated. Carter looked at me with a mixture of fear and apology. "Evelyn's been talking to your replacement. And your replacement is your sister." The world tilted. Everything I thought I knew shattered in a single breath. I don't remember leaving Carter's apartment. I don't remember driving. All I remember is sitting in my car behind an abandoned bowling alley off East Talmadge Avenue, gripping the steering wheel so hard my hands ached. My sister. My own sister. Lila had always lived in the shadow of my achievements. At least that's what she used to say when we fought. I thought she was joking. I thought she was being dramatic. I thought she loved me. Apparently, I was wrong about everything. I stared at my phone like it might answer the question clawing at my insides. Why? But I wasn't stupid. I wasn't calling her. Not yet. Instead, I opened the maintenance logs Carter gave me, forcing myself to focus. I couldn't afford to lose control. Not when the stakes were this high. Not when Evelyn and Dean were orchestrating a multimillion-dollar insurance scam and planning to lay the blame entirely on me. If they succeeded, I wouldn't just lose my career. I'd lose everything, my reputation, my credibility, maybe my freedom. I took a long, shaky breath and forced logic to drown out panic. Step 1. Confirm the extent of the setup. I spent the afternoon cross-referencing the forged documents with the digital versions I still had access to from home. Everything lined up exactly how Carter said it would. My signature used on false approvals, my recommendations deleted or altered, documents misplaced conveniently around the time my access was cut. Step 2. Identify what they needed from Lila. It made sense. She worked in HR at Ridgeway's smaller facility. She had access to personnel files, digital signature archives, compliance records. She knew my habits, my handwriting, my tone. She could have provided samples to make the forgeries airtight. And if she was helping leadership, she could also monitor me, feed information back to Evelyn. My stomach twisted. Step 3. Collect undeniable evidence. I needed more than forged logs. I needed emails, timestamps, badge records, safety reports, payroll adjustments tied to the insurance policy. I needed proof of intent, proof of conspiracy, proof that could ruin them before they ruined me. I wasn't just fighting for revenge anymore. I was fighting for survival. Step 4. Build my exit strategy. If Ridgeway caught wind that I had the files, they wouldn't just slander me. They'd destroy me. They'd make sure no employer would touch me. They'd bury me under legal threats. If Carter was telling the truth, they were already watching. So I took the safest route I could think of. I rented a co-working space downtown under a fake consulting name, Martech Compliance Analysis. Paid cash. No paper trail. No connection to me. I set up a burner laptop, created encrypted cloud backups, stored copies of the forged documents in multiple locations. I made sure the evidence was scattered enough that they'd never be able to destroy it all. By midnight, the inside of that tiny office looked like the inside of my brain. Chaotic, furious, alive. Step 5. Identify allies. There weren't many. Not inside Ridgeway, anyway. But outside? There were agencies, regulators, investigators who loved taking down corrupt manufacturing giants. The Department of Labor, OSHA, even insurance fraud units. But none of them would move without solid proof. And I wasn't going to hand them anything until I had everything. Step 6. Leverage the one advantage I had. Evelyn thought I was broken. Dean thought I was gone. Lila thought I was blind. They didn't realize I saw more clearly now than I ever had. So I made the hardest decision of all. I picked up a burner phone, dialed a number I never wanted to call again. And when a cautious voice answered, I said, "Carter, I'm in. Whatever you know, whatever you've been holding back. I need all of it." There was a long silence on the other end. Then Carter whispered, "You understand this means we can't go back, right?" I closed my eyes. "I don't want to go back." "All right," he said. "Then we do this fast. Because if your sister is involved, Evelyn already knows you visited me." My pulse spiked. "What?" "She's not the only one watching you," he said. "Someone else reached out after you left. Someone who's been tracking you for weeks." A chill crept up my spine. "What do you mean?" He hesitated. "Marlowe, there's another mole inside Ridgeway, and this one isn't on Evelyn's side." Carter's words hung in the air like smoke. Thick, choking, impossible to ignore. "Another mole?" I repeated. "Inside Ridgeway?" "Yeah," he said. "Someone feeding information, but not to Evelyn. To someone else." My first thought was that he meant regulators. A whistleblower. Someone honest. But Carter's tone wasn't relief. It was dread. "Who?" I pressed. He let out a long, shaky breath. "Someone high up. Higher than Evelyn. Higher than Dean. Someone who's been watching the whole situation play out for months." My pulse pounded hard enough to hurt. "Carter, that doesn't make sense. There's no one above the CEO except—" I froze. "The board." He nodded grimly. My heart sank. This wasn't just a corporate cover-up. It wasn't just Evelyn and Dean padding their pockets. The board was monitoring internal politics like a chess game, watching their own executives break laws and silently letting it happen. "Why the hell would the board let this go on?" I demanded. "That's the part you won't like," Carter said quietly. "They knew about the insurance scam before Evelyn even pitched it. That landed like a punch. They approved it," he continued. Quietly, off record, back channel. "And now that the feds are paying more attention to manufacturing safety, they want a fall guy just as much as Evelyn does." I felt physically ill. "So they're letting her set me up?" "No," Carter said. "They're letting her think she's setting you up." I stared at him. "What are you talking about?" He swallowed, rubbed his jaw, and lowered his voice. "The board's mole isn't loyal to Evelyn. He's loyal to himself. And he reached out because he wants you to win." That made even less sense. "Why would someone on the board want to help me?" Carter hesitated too long. "Carter," I snapped, stepping closer. "Tell me." He ran a hand through his hair, bracing himself. He said, his words, not mine, "Marlo Reyes is the only one in that building who ever told the truth. He's been watching you since your 3rd year." "What?" My voice cracked. "He said you were the only employee whose reports matched reality. He said you were the only one who didn't cook numbers when pressured. And now that the board wants a way to kill the insurance scheme without exposing themselves, he wants to use you." I felt the room tilt. "This mole," I whispered. "Who is he?" Carter looked me dead in the eyes. It's your father's old partner. I blinked. What? He continued, slowly, as if he knew each word was going to detonate something inside me. Arthur Keene, board vice chairman. Your dad worked with him 20 years ago. You met him once, at that scholarship dinner when you were a teenager. My stomach dropped. A face flashed, salt and pepper hair. A firm handshake, a man who'd told me, "You've got your father's spine, kid." "I don't understand," I whispered. "Why me?" "Because your father and Keene built Ridgeway's original safety program together," Carter said. "Before the company went corporate. Before it got greedy." My breath caught. "And Keene thinks the company lost its soul the day your dad died." The world went silent. My father had been a safety engineer, the kind who treated protocols like oxygen. He died when I was 19. A heart attack. Sudden. Brutal. I never knew he had a tie to Ridgeway. I never knew he built anything there. Carter continued. Keene thinks bringing you in was fate. He thinks what's happening now is his chance to make things right. But he can't expose Evelyn without exposing the board's own involvement. So he's been feeding you information, using employees he trusts. My breath trembled. Who? I asked. Carter looked at me with something like apology. You're not going to like this part either. I braced myself. The board mole's main contact inside Ridgeway, the person Keene used to track Evelyn's moves, he swallowed, was your sister. The world shattered. My sister was spying for him? Yes, until Evelyn found out and flipped her. My knees nearly buckled. So Lila didn't betray you because she hated you, Carter said gently. She betrayed you because she got caught. My throat tightened. And now, I forced out. Carter looked at me with grim certainty. Now she's working for the wrong side. And she knows you're the only person who can blow the whole thing open. The realization hit like ice water. My sister wasn't just part of the setup. She was the linchpin. And I wasn't just planning retaliation anymore. I was planning a war. I didn't understand. I didn't want to understand. But the more Carter explained, the more the truth took shape. Cold, sharp, and merciless. Why did Evelyn do all of this? I asked, my voice barely steady. Why go this far? Why risk burning down an entire company? Why drag my sister into it? Why frame me? Carter didn't answer right away. Instead, he walked to the box nearest the door, pulled out a thick packet of documents I hadn't seen yet, and dropped it on the table between us. Because the company's dying, he said quietly. And they're letting it die. I frowned. What are you talking about? Look, he insisted. Really look. I opened the packet, and for the next 2 minutes all I saw were numbers. Then the meaning snapped into focus. Declining contracts, massive debt, years of deferred maintenance, millions siphoned off in bonuses, insurance premiums skyrocketing from repeat violations. 3 major clients quietly pulling out of their contracts because of quality concerns. Ridgeway Metals wasn't struggling. It was rotting from the inside out, and Evelyn had known. Jesus, I whispered, flipping another page. This is insolvency. Carter nodded grimly. They've been hiding it for 5 years. Ever since your father died. I froze. What does my dad have to do with this? He hesitated, then met my eyes. Your father was the one who kept the company honest. His safety program wasn't just about safety. It was about accountability, transparent audits, third-party verification, document trails that couldn't be altered. I felt pressure building in my chest. When he died, Carter continued, Evelyn took over. At first she followed his principles. But then the board pushed harder for profit. They wanted shortcuts, faster output, fewer shutdowns. So she caved, I said bitterly. No, Carter said. She adapted. He walked around the table until he was facing me directly. Your father's system made it nearly impossible to hide misconduct. Evelyn's new system made it nearly impossible to prove misconduct. She started centralizing reports, consolidating oversight, cutting out third-party validators. She built a machine where the numbers always looked good, even when reality was collapsing. I swallowed hard. So she hid the decline. Exactly. And when the decline got too big to hide, the board made her an offer. He leaned closer, voice low. A total reset. Kill the old plant, cash the insurance payout, rebuild under a different compliance model. Clean books, fresh start, no accountability. My stomach twisted. And me? Carter didn't blink. You were the perfect scapegoat because you were the only person still following your father's system. You were the only one documenting truth. The only one who noticed the equipment failures weren't random. The only one who flagged risks correctly. And that made me dangerous. To them? Lethal. I shook my head slowly as the realization dawned. Ugly, shattering. So Evelyn wasn't just protecting the company. She was protecting her legacy. Her legacy, Carter confirmed. And her money, her bonuses, her reputation, her entire career image as the visionary female CEO who revitalized manufacturing. He paused. And your sister? I felt myself tense. Why did she switch sides? I whispered. Carter's expression darkened. Because Evelyn promised her a director-level promotion once you were out of the picture. She promised her power, influence, money, a future you kept her from. My chest burned. You're lying, I said. But it was weak, shaky, hollow. Carter shook his head and handed me one last document. A signed memo. From Evelyn. To Lila. Subject. Future role following operational restructure. The final line made my skin crawl. Once Marlowe is removed from all compliance records, your position will be secured. Your loyalty will not be forgotten. Loyalty. That was the price. My sister betrayed me because Evelyn offered her what she thought she deserved. What she thought I had stolen from her by succeeding first. And just like that, everything clicked. Evelyn didn't hate me. She feared me, because I was the one person who could expose exactly what she had done. She needed me ruined. She needed me disgraced. She needed me buried. Not metaphorically, professionally, personally, permanently. Now I understood the motive. Now I understood the stakes. Now I understood why there was no going back. This wasn't just betrayal. It was annihilation. I spent the night in that rented office downtown, surrounded by copies of forged signatures, hidden reports, insurance policies, and the memo promising my sister a future built on my erasure. Somewhere between 3 a.m. and dawn, the fear burned off. What was left wasn't panic. It wasn't rage. It was clarity. Cold, steady, surgical clarity. If Evelyn wanted a clean reset, I'd give her one, just not the kind she planned. And if the board wanted to use me as their scalpel, fine. I'd make sure the cuts landed exactly where they deserved. By mid-morning I had everything consolidated into 3 encrypted packages. Package A, forged documents and digital trails. Package B, email threads proving insurance fraud intent. Package C, financial records showing Ridgway's concealed insolvency. I didn't send them to regulators. Not yet. I sent them anonymously to 6 of Ridgway's biggest clients, including the one with a $40 million annual contract they couldn't afford to lose. I attached a simple line. Before you renew, you should know what your vendor is hiding. Within an hour, my burner phone lit up with panicked emails forwarded from clients to Ridgway leadership. Angry, terrified, demanding explanations. The bomb had landed. Next, I messaged Arthur Keene. Not as a victim, not as a pawn, as a negotiator. I told him what I knew, what I had, what the clients now had, and what I intended to do next. He called within minutes, voice sharp and controlled. Do you intend to destroy the company? No, I said. Just the people who destroyed it first. A long pause. Then he said quietly, name your terms. I did. I demanded immediate removal of Evelyn Cross as CEO, termination of Dean Harker for cause protection for Carter, back pay for injured workers and families, a full public accountability statement from the board, a permanent independent safety office inside the company, answering only to regulators, not leadership and my sister. I added finally, steady and calm. I want her gone. No promotion. No favor. No soft landing. Keene exhaled. She won't be protected, he said. She made her choice. For a moment, I didn't feel triumph. Just a small, sharp ache where my sibling bond used to be. But justice wasn't sentimental. Not anymore. By the time I walked into Ridgeway headquarters 2 days later, the collapse had already begun. Security was escorting Dean out, red-faced, shouting, trying to grab his laptop. Evelyn was in a glass conference room surrounded by board members, her face white, her hands shaking as they read aloud the emails she once thought were buried forever. My sister stood outside HR with a cardboard box in her arms. When she saw me, her expression flickered. Guilt, anger, desperation, all tangled together. "Marlo, please." "No," I said softly. "You don't get to say my name like you didn't sell it." She started to cry. I didn't feel a thing. I walked past her and into the conference room. Silence fell. Evelyn lifted her eyes to me. There was no fury there now. No superiority. Just fear. Cold, cracking fear. "Marlo," she whispered. "You don't understand." "I understand perfectly," I interrupted. "You built a system on lies. And now you get to live inside them." A board member slid a document toward her. "Ms. Cross, this is your termination notice." The room stayed quiet as she signed. Hands trembling, mouth pressed into a thin line. Everything she betrayed for, everything she risked lives for, gone in seconds. Justice isn't loud. Sometimes it's a pen scratching paper. The following week, I was formally contracted, not employed, to establish Ridgeway's new independent safety division. Not because I wanted to save them, because the workers deserved better. Carter became director of field operations. The injured workers got settlements without gag orders. The fraudulent insurance claim was withdrawn before it could trigger a federal investigation. The clients stayed. The board survived barely. And Evelyn, last I heard, she left Akron entirely. My sister moved to another state. We haven't spoken since. 6 months later, I walked the floor of Ridgeway's rebuilt press line. New guards, new systems, new people in charge who actually listened. A welder I'd known for years stopped me and said, "It's safer now, for the first time in decades. That's because of you." I nodded, but inside, it wasn't pride I felt. It was peace. The kind you only get after clawing yourself out of a grave someone else dug for you. As I left the plant, I paused under the new safety banner hanging above the main entrance. Bold letters, bright metal, "Truth keeps workers alive." Fitting, because in the end, that's what saved me. And what destroyed them.